is a mediation? When I asked a class, one guy said, isn't that where you go and you're all quiet? No, that's a meditation. Let's take a look at a mediation now. A mediation is an interesting task. If you look at the word mediation, it has the word media in it, so it comes from medium. So you are mediating a piece of information to another person or to another text form. We'll talk about that later. Yeah, but you are mediating information as opposed to, for example, translating it. So we'll talk about this difference later. Often you will have a Klausur that has one text in the A part, and then you have a B part where you have a mediation that somehow has to do with that first text. But often the text you're supposed to mediate is in German, and the target language, so the language that your text later on is supposed to be, is English. And there are really a number of things you should look at when you do this kind of task. And I'll show you 3 steps that you can take to write perfect texts. Let's take a look. So let's take a look how to write a mediation. I've put this information into 3 steps that you can easily follow and write a good text. Let's go. So first of all, what kind of a task is this again, and why do we need it? Actually, I find that this is one of the more intelligent kind of tasks. In real life, you will have a number of situations, if you use your foreign language, where you will be using these kind of skills exactly. Only often, of course, this is in speaking and not in writing. But again, it's very useful in real life, because normally you will have a group of German people like your family, or maybe a company you work for, and you will obviously have people speaking English in our case, so again, a company, a family, whatever, and you need to mediate between them. Let me give you some examples of where this comes up in real life that you all know or have heard of these situations anyways. This is Annette Dittert from the Tagesschau, and her job is mostly mediating. So what she does is she listens to information in English, for example in the parliament, having debates, having discussions, and then she puts this information into a completely different text form, sums it up and presents it to a German audience. It's maybe interesting to note she doesn't translate word for word what Mr. Johnson or whoever has said, but she puts this into this information and certain aspects of this information into a new form, and it is specifically for German, so German interests will be highlighted, for example. Another situation that often includes mediation is, let's say you're an exchange student in an American family and you get a letter from home telling you news about what's happening in your family, and your host family might ask, so what's going on at home? And you would use the information from the letter and put this into a new form, which in this case would be like a sort of small speech you're giving to this family to tell them about what's happening at home, in English of course, and the letter you have in front of you is German. So it's not, the task is not really far-fetched. It's something you would do daily if you speak your foreign language and really use it. So it's not bad. Now, let's take a look at what this would look like in a Klausur, which of course is what you have to write, and it's good to know. I've made up a task here, and I'll read it out to you. You have a good friend in the UK. There's a debate in his English class on the use of technology in schools, and your friend wants to present a German perspective on the issue. You use the information from the following newspaper article, Warum Technologie den Schulalltag positiv verändern wird. By the way, I invented this. From Spiegel magazine, to write an email to your friend. So in this task you would have this article in German, and you would have to produce an English text. Let's take a look at this task now in some more detail. The information you need, and this is really pretty unique to a mediation. First of all, the question is, which text type do you really need to write? There are lots of different text types, I don't know, article, I don't know, a summary, write a speech text or whatever, you need to look at that. Then you are writing to a certain audience, so what do you have to remember for that? Which style of writing do you need? And we'll have to take a look at that in a second. And the last point is which information should be included. So should you just talk about everything that's in this article, for example, or is it limited to certain points? Now, remember these colors I've used here, green, yellow and red, and you can see you have this information in the tasks. Which text type? It says down there, an email. Who are you writing to and which style? A good friend. So that means you use the style of writing you would use when writing to a good friend. What information? It's the information he needs is on the use of technologies in schools in Germany. So a German perspective on technology in schools from this article. So this is what you're focusing on. Step 2, when you read the text, what should you do? Obviously, you can already limit what you need to look at in detail, and I would do this by marking the paragraphs. You can mark them with a text marker or just underline them or make a line next to that part of the text so you know, okay, I need to focus on this. This is really the information I need for my task. You should take notes, but I would already take these notes in English because later on you can then use these notes to write your text. If the notes were in German, it would be much more difficult. You would have to start translating them, and you would have to, I don't know, you would go back to the text and so forth. So it's really intelligent to already take English notes. One point that you do have to do is there will be some central words in the topic you're describing, and they might be really tricky to describe or to translate. I say describe or translate because you're not supposed to just translate them, you're supposed to describe them so that the person you are writing to will understand them. Let me give you some examples of where this can be tricky. If you have words like Bildungschancen, Medienkompetenz, Schüler mit Migrationshintergrund. These are words that are often used in a German text in this context, talking about media use at school, and I've given you some possible translations. You could translate Bildungschancen with educational opportunity, equal chances to a good education, and so forth, Medienkompetenz, media literacy, or media skills, or say if you're writing to a good friend, maybe you simply want to say that people can work well with all kinds of media. So maybe you would describe it more than use like a technical term like this. Schüler mit Migrationshintergrund, students with a migration background, or simply, again, you're writing to a friend, students whose parents do not come from Germany. This might be not 100% exact, this term you're using then, or this description, but I think in the context it fits well. Step 3, obviously you're writing this text, but you should keep some things in mind. First of all, again, keep the 3 things that you need to focus on in mind. Before you start writing, again, think, okay, what kind of text form did I need to write? In this case, remember in the example we had an email. What is specific to this text form? Does it have headline, title? What, for example, makes an email? Well, it will have a line that says what it's about. It will have, you could include actually an email address. It will have some form of greeting at the beginning, some salutation at the end, or something like that. So you need to include that to make obvious that you're writing an email. Again, keep in mind who am I writing this text to, and this would imply a certain kind of style. For example, again, this friend, you would write in an informal, colloquial language, but say you're writing in a different task, you're writing to a teacher. This would change your language significantly, I would say. So do take a look at that. Also, and this is really one of the central things in the mediation also, are there any cultural concepts that you need to explain to this person or this group that you're writing to? And this sounds quite abstract, so let me give you some examples of what this could be. Say you are writing about football in Germany and write about, or this comes up just as on the side somewhere, and you have this logo or this club that you're talking about. an English person, or especially an American person, they wouldn't know what this is about. And if you say, well, it's a football, or an American a soccer club, they might not know that soccer plays a really, really big role in Germany, and this is a huge club with millions of fans and so forth. So you would need to explain all this if you talk to, for example, an American. To a German, you would not need to explain this because they would know. Yeah, so keep this in mind. You could make comparisons sometimes. For an American, you could say, well, it's sort of like football in America, and there are lots of fans and so forth. Another thing where this is really obvious is the carnival in Cologne. People from, again, California would not know what this is about, and they could not imagine anything about it. So you really cannot just say on the side, yeah, and then we all went to the carnival in Cologne. They wouldn't know what this is. So explain what kind of celebration is it, when does it take place, and so forth. So even though this is not really part of your task, it might come up that you might need to explain cultural concepts like these two examples. Again, when you're writing the text, remember, you are supposed to look for specific information. Often you're not asked just to summarize a text, but you're really looking for something specific. It might be more or less a summary, so you might need to ask for pretty much everything in the text, but it might be specific, so you might only need to look for certain things. There are some things on language that are good to keep in mind. Don't go back to the original German text too often. The problem is, when you do that, you will end up translating more and thinking and writing on your own less. So if you have notes, that's good, because these notes are already in English and you will use them to form good English sentences. If you stick to the German text, your text will sound like a bad translation often. So don't do that, it's not a good idea. Normally in most text types it's a good idea to write paragraphs, so sentence units. Don't just write one long text without any kind of form. Sometimes you have a text where one tense or the other comes up a lot. Say if you're writing a summary kind of text, it will be the present. If you write sort of a story or a report, it might be the past. So, and there are problems with these tenses, you know, for example, in the present, he, she, it, as, and so forth. So keep in mind which tense you are using and which problems this might bring for you specifically. Sometimes people confuse a mediation with other kind of tasks, so let me tell you what kind of task it is not and why. A summary. It's not a summary because you're not putting everything that's important in the text into your text. You might need to leave some things out. It's not a translation because you're adapting it, you're putting it into a new text form, you're leaving out entire passages, so it's definitely not a translation. It is not a creative task, so you cannot just come up with things you find interesting or you find, I don't know, funny. You need to base what you write on the text you have. And it's not a comment, you don't write your personal opinion, you are supposed to show what is in the text. What's tricky, however, is that a mediation does include some aspects of these tasks. For example, it is a little bit like a summary sometimes because you will often need to show the main information in the text in another language, in another form, etc. But you will focus on the main information in that text. It is a little bit like a translation because you do need to translate some key concepts. Of course, you're not doing this word by word, etc. But yes, there are aspects in it that are like a translation. It's not completely a creative task, but you might need to do some things that are a little bit creative, like you're writing to a friend, you could invent a name for this friend. You could refer to, I don't know, something like, thanks for your letter you sent me, quite interesting to hear about this and this. You might invent something there to make the text, I don't know, smoother or so, but it's not completely a creative task because not everything is creative or not the major part of the text. And finally, it can have aspects of a comment because you could put in a sentence or a phrase where your personal opinion comes across on the side. But this is not the focus like it would be in a comment. So, as you can see, a mediation is quite a tricky task, but once you've got the basic idea down, it's not really that hard, and I think you can do it easily if you follow these 3 steps that I just showed you. If you have any questions, any comments, want another video on something, please let me know and I'll see what I can do. Goodbye!